Okay, so like I said, my name is Aryahi Narvekar. I'm a sophomore in high school and I live in Central Jersey. And two of my greatest passions are neuroscience and music. And so for this project, I decided to combine the two. So for this project, I decided to tackle a couple different questions. I'm not going to read these out to you because you can kind of read them yourself. But the main goal behind all of these was to gauge emotional response and its effects on decision and decision making through decision-based tasks. So first of all, I want to kind of go through what the presentation kind of looked like. So participants would listen to small clips of music and then answer forms on a question aimed at understanding how they reacted to it emotionally. And they could be rewarded with candy if they wanted. So that was kind of the decision-based task that we used. And there were about 5 questions under each clip of music, and you can see 2 of those examples here on this slide. So the first one that on the top says, please rate the mood of the song that you just heard, and that's kind of gauging emotional response. Whereas the second one is also engaging enjoyment. It's testing like how much they enjoy the song. And you can see that a little bit later that these 2 will be very heavily used in kind of looking at the data, the quantitative data. So this is a funny little photo of my brother, but so you can see here that we tested a really good variety of ages, gender, and race. We actually used this demographic data to come to conclusions about how they viewed the music or how they responded to the music. And you'll see that again a little bit later. And so again, this is just kind of looking at demographics. And yet again, this data will be used pretty heavily when understanding how that affects emotional response. So these 2 slides, these 2 pie charts that you see is just, the first one is just saying how, like, have you had any musical lessons or training? So like, how long have you been like kind of affiliated with any instrument or something? And then the second one is, do you play an instrument or do you sing? So those are 2 questions that we asked in the demographic section of the form that participants were answering their questions on. So this is kind of the procedure that we went over, for each participant. So participants listened to a song and they rated the emotion of the music and the lyrics. They do this around 3 times for 3 different like samples of music, and then they do the decision-based task, which is right there, and it says like do you want candy? How much do you want? And then when? And they could say they either wanted candy right then or they could choose tomorrow. And yes, they actually did receive candy. They received probably around 5 pieces of candy for each participant. And so now I just kind of want to get into the music portion, like what did participants hear? Why was this specific music chosen? And what effect did that music have on participants? So first I want to kind of get into the background of kind of the scientific aspect of why I chose these 3 specific pieces of music, which we'll see in the next slide. But so when I was looking at research papers, kind of understanding the background of why I wanted to do this, one research paper that I read, which will be referenced a little bit later, reference 2 scales that are usually in research programs like this, or research project like this. The first scale is arousal, which you can see on the y-axis there. Arousal kind of tests like whether the emotion that you're experiencing has a high energy or low energy. So you can see that being like calm or serene or being like bored, that's kind of a low arousal because it's not really a strong feeling. Whereas something like being astonished or fearful or frustrated or angry or excited, something like that has a very high like arousal. So it has very high energy associated with that emotion. Whereas valence, which is another scale, assesses the mood of the music. So is it happy or sad? So you can see as you go farther along the x-axis in the positive direction, you'll see that it's more positive. Whereas if you go the negative side, it's more negative. And so now I kind of want to get into the 3 pieces of music that I use. I think some of you guys will recognize these pieces because they're just music. They're just like normal music. The first one is R.I.P. Fredo by Playboi Carti. I'm sure a lot of us know who Playboi Carti is. And this song was, I ranked it kind of personally, I ranked it very low valence because it was kind of more of an angrier sort of piece. But it was very high arousal because it was very energetic, and that was hip hop, sort of rap, that spectrum. And then the next one is Blondie by Current Joys. This one was an indie piece of music, and I really enjoy all these 3 pieces of music, but I think Blondie was probably my favorite. Blondie was very high valence because it was very calming. It was sort of like that background music that you hear like sometimes at stores or something. And it's a very low arousal because it's a very relaxing song. So it's not a super strong feeling, but it is a very positive feeling. And Sour Patch Kids, which is the last song that you're going to see here, was very high valence and it was very high arousal. It's one of those songs that you play in the summer when you're like driving down the road. And yeah, so these are the three songs that I used. And this one, Sour Patch Kids, was, yeah, high valence, high arousal. So you can see that each of these three songs had very different aspects to them. And yeah. So we had participants listen to three songs. Again, we're just going to go over the procedure one more time. We had participants listen to three songs and rate features of those songs. So some of the features that we tested emotional response on was lyrics, mood, intensity, and then we asked whether or not they'd listen to it again. And then when I was creating the quantitative analysis for these songs, I averaged the rating of each of these songs and looked at how those ratings relate to whether or not the person enjoyed the song and whether or not they listen again to the song. And so unsurprisingly, the results show that enjoyment is the biggest predictor of whether someone will or will not listen again. And you can see that in the top left-hand graph. And this is kind of obvious, but this was kind of like sort of a baseline study, and that helped give us confidence in the experiment and in the data. And we can see that a similar trend exists for the other three features, although it's not quite as strong. And you can see that the yeses, which are the people that would listen again, they clicked yes on whether or not they listen again. Those are clustered on the right-hand side for highest mood, and the no's are all clustered on the left for lowest mood. And a similar split, though less extreme, can be seen in song intensity and mood. But when I was doing the quantitative analysis, unfortunately, the more years of musical training participants had, the less they enjoyed song two. And you can see here that I used something called an R value, and an R value was introduced to me by my mentor. And an R value is something called a correlation value. So R equals, let's say X is a correlation value. So one is a complete correlation, and anything less than one would be kind of less correlation. And so you can see here that the R value was like a lot smaller. So even though there wasn't much of a correlation, there still was a correlation, and that correlation was negative. So as you can see here, as there was more music training, there was less enjoyment of song two. And then I use this kind of same concept to go over like this music experience predicts song enjoyment. So for this one, like the more instruments somebody played, the more they enjoyed songs 1 and 3. And then the same thing went for the more genres they liked. They enjoyed song 3 a little bit less as well. So that was kind of my quantitative analysis from the data that I received. And so this is question 3, asking, can music affect decision making? And so this is, again, like I said, I would reference a research paper later on in the project, and this is that research paper. So the protocol is based on this research paper, which found that tempo, but not mood, affected the temporal decision making. I tested mood, but this research paper tested tempo. So tempo, again, is like how fast or how slow is a piece of music, and how that affected temporal decision making. So do you want a small reward today or a big reward later? And in this study, there was not really much of a relationship found, although it's probably because participants could see through the baseline question that we asked. And this is the baseline question that we asked. It said, would you rather lose $10 today or $200 a year from now? And I think this is a pretty obvious question. So it's pretty obvious to choose the quote unquote right answer for this question. So that kind of muddled up the data a little bit because participants were choosing it based on what they thought was the correct answer, not based on the music stimuli that was presented to them. And so in the future, I think future studies should make the decision test more subtle if I was to do this research paper again. And some key takeaways that I got from this project is that music affects everybody in different ways. This is pretty obvious because, again, everybody's a different person. Everybody, like, some people will enjoy intensity, some people won't enjoy intensity, some people like lyrics, some people don't like lyrics. And that kind of ties into number 2. So song enjoyment predicts whether or not someone will listen again. And so surprisingly, so do mood of the song and lyrics and overall intensity. So again, everybody's different. Everybody likes different things. So this was kind of, it should have been a little bit more cleaner in the decision-based task. And then again, just going over that last point that I mentioned in the last slide, future work on how music affects decision-making needs to be a little bit more subtle for experiments like these to be actually effective. And yeah, that's my presentation. Thank you so much. And I just kind of want to thank my mentor and my parents and friends and family that really participated in this project. So yeah, thank you.
Awesome. The photo of your brother is just still cracking me up. So a nice addition. I'm curious, or actually, this is a question from the audience. If you were to expand on this experiment, you already mentioned refining the task itself. Are there any dimensions that you might also consider with the music that you think might be important to account, or what are some additional modifications that you'd make?
Yeah, so when I was first going over this project way back in like probably September or October, I definitely wanted to experiment a little bit with like the scale of the music. So we know that a lot of Asian music follows a pentatonic scale, whereas we know that American music or more westernized music follows a different scale. So I wanted to experiment with that. So if I was to do the experiment again, I would experiment with things like the pentatonic scale, which definitely have a different effect than westernized scales. But yeah, that was something that I was really considering. And I read a lot of research papers that, again, that like was explaining about different types of music. So I wanted to explain with like kick drums was another one that I think I wanted to experiment with but couldn't, because I didn't figure out how to like remove the kick drum from a song. But I mean, if I had the technology to do that, I definitely would. So yeah.
Nice. And I'm curious, after going through this study, how has it impacted the way that you might think about the role that music has in your life, for studying, for getting up for an event? Yeah, I'm curious if there's any implications there.
Yeah, so I think I really like when going into this, when going into Polygens, first of all, I was always super interested in music. I would like growing up, I was exposed to a lot of different types of music because not only I have an ethnic background, but also a lot of my friends are exposed to like different types of music growing up. And through that, I've been exposed to different types of music. But I think that it really shaped this study really shaped my like the way that I view music as a whole because through this I learned like what type of music could be effective for studying, what type of music could be effective for just working out and relaxing. And I know like for a fact for me, I am really into like hip hop. I'm into a lot of like that whole like modernized hip hop scene, and that makes me feel a certain way. And through this study, I wanted to see if it made other people feel a certain way. Like, did it feel the same? Did they feel the same as me when listening to my music, or did they feel different than I did? And I kind of wanted to explore those differences based on demographics and kind of form predictions based on how people could feel based on the demographics. So yeah.
Perfect. Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing your world with us. And